Hello everybody and welcome to webinar 2 of the digital badge for Universal Design for Learning. I can see our participant list is jumping up very nicely now. Unfortunately today my sidekick on this project, Lisa Padden, could not be with us today. She had another engagement, so she sends her apologies, and she will be back with us for webinar number 3, which will be coming in the final week of the course. And let me just shut down Outlook in the background so we're not getting any of those nasty noises. Okay, so listen, I hope you guys are all doing really well in the badge so far and that you're enjoying the course. Today, as you know, this webinar is going to focus predominantly on the redesign activity, which is the major activity that you undertake as part of this course, and also take a look at the future badge facilitation for those of you who are interested in becoming future facilitators of the badge. So to start, I'm actually just going to take a look at your next week. So the next week, which is week 4 of the course, hopefully you guys can all see that window very nicely. If you cannot see that window, if someone could drop it into the Q&A box, please, that would be very nice indeed. And indeed, as you go along, drop your questions into the Q&A feature, which should be on your Zoom meeting control bar. Just click Q&A, open up a question, and I'll get to it at an appropriate point in the session. Normally, my colleague Lisa would help me along here and interject when questions come in, but I'll keep half an eye on it and hopefully be able to answer as we go along. So just to look at week 4, the week 4 block on the course homepage, um, I just want to really take you step by step, I suppose, through what you're going to be doing over the next week, because next week is all about reflection. So it's really all about you taking a step back. You've learned a lot already about UDL, about the diversities in your college. You've already taken a look at that. And now we really want to start to think about applying that practice. Think about where your current practice already stands in relation to UDL. So the next week is all about guiding you through that process. So your first stage is to go through online module number 5, which really, again, cues up that reflection piece. It actually gives you some concrete examples of what others have done in this area, so previous badge participants themselves, and it shows you some short video reflections from them, so you can see what others have done in the past and maybe get some ideas. You undertake a deep self-reflection activity, which is basically where you go step by step through the guidelines, looking at your current practice and where you can make changes. You'll have your third peer triad meeting, hopefully your third one at this stage. If you haven't already organized that meeting, please get on it as soon as you possibly can with your triad members to schedule that in for next week. So they're the 3 key activities. That triad meeting is really vital, because that's where you begin to present your ideas to the group for the redesign activity, start brainstorming and get feedback from them. So it's really where you'll hopefully begin to crystallize and finalize the redesign that you're going to undertake through week 5 to 9 of the course. So if we scroll down to week 5 to 9, which is kind of week 5, of course, starts Thursday week. And this is really the kind of self-directed part of the course where you really get into the meat and bones of UDL implementation. And we'll go through a little bit more of that when I launch up the PowerPoint presentation again. But essentially, yeah, that's where you're actually doing the UDL implementation in real time, and you're reporting on the results of that. You also notice here, for those of you who are doing the future facilitators activity, in other words, those of you who want to go on to roll out the course in your own institutions next year, and that's also included in week 5 to 9 of the course, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Lastly, just to draw your attention to this weekly redesign activity drop-in session. This is where my colleague Lisa Padden will be available in an online meeting room that you can drop in, you can run your ideas on the redesign activity past her, or indeed the future facilitators activity. You can ask your questions if you're running into some issues that you need to tease out. That's a really good place to just drop in and say hello, and they'll take place every lunchtimes on a Thursday each week throughout that week 5 to 9 block. Okay, so I'm just going to jump back into my PowerPoint here. So the redesign activity, what's actually happening here? The first stage is self-reflection. The second stage is the actual UDL implementation itself, when you will make the changes to your practice in real time. And the third stage is the report. We provide a template for that report that we'll talk through with you today. So the self-reflection piece, you're going to reflect on your current practice using UDL as a lens. You're going to look for opportunities in that through the guidelines to improve your practice. You're going to look individually at those guidelines as part of the deep self-reflection exercise we talked about. As part of that, we'd be encouraging you to use recent student evaluations of your practice to help guide that. So just, time to step back, reflect, take a look at what previous students have said, and maybe, trying to map some of that feedback and evaluation to the UDL framework itself. This whole deep reflection exercise really acts as a kind of a notebook for you to use in the redesign activity. So it's going to really help you to guide your direction of travel really in the redesign activity. And you'll see the last point here, be bold and ambitious and use this opportunity to create a wish list. I want to be very specific here that the deep reflection exercise is where you can, if you like, you can dream big. And a lot of it is about what you would ideally like to do with your practice moving forward. And it's not necessarily linked to the redesign activity specifically. It's more going to inform the redesign activity. But so basically this can act as a kind of wish list for the future, for want of a better term. So this is where you can be really bold and ambitious. In the redesign activity itself, we're going to ask you to pick something that's much more manageable, because we are talking about a very short period of time. And we always say better to do a successful small scale UDL implementation first time than to try something big and end up with something that's, not ideal. Okay, so as part of the reflection piece of this, the peer triad meeting is absolutely vital. It really is. The role of the triad really in this, in peer triad meeting number 3, is to guide you in the redesign activity piece. So you're going to present your ideas to them. They're going to say, well, that's a really good idea, but maybe have you thought about this way instead? It might be maybe it's easier to manage this way, or maybe you might just have a better outcome for your students this way. Maybe there's better student engagement if you did this way. So all of those conversations and all of those, like that opportunity to bounce ideas around is vital in getting yourself to a redesign activity result that's really something to be proud of. In terms of the implementation piece itself, that part of the redesign activity, we really do want you to choose something manageable, a manageable element of your teaching to change. We're very flexible about what that is. As an example, people might choose a single lecture that's on a very difficult topic. Maybe it's what we would identify as kind of a roadblock, which, something that students constantly come back to you on. That's a really good place to start. Could be a small group of lectures, maybe 2 or 3 lectures that are related. It could be a single assignment or assessment, or a single activity that you normally do as part of a particular program. So don't try to overturn an entire program overnight, because it's just not likely to happen within the small space of time that we have in this course. Really, the redesign activity is, think of it as you dipping your toe in the water of UDL implementation and getting used to that design thinking, that design process that is so essential when you're looking at UDL. So the change that you make as part of the implementation should be identified through the reflection and the peer brainstorming. And again, that's part of that kind of design process, that it is something that's very much, there is method to your madness. You are going through each stage of that UDL guideline, and you're identifying ideas through that route. You're using the framework as a guide to help your design. There's some really good examples, as I mentioned, in the next online module that you'll do in the coming week, which starts tomorrow, week 4. So you'll see examples from Helena Farrell, who is actually a previous participant of this badge, and you will already know from the module on engagement. And you'll see examples from 2 other practitioners based in HEIs as well. So I think they act as a really good kind of way to inspire ideas and say, oh, I see what she did in this discipline here. I can see that maybe there's a chance for me to interpret what she has done there and bring it into my own discipline here. So I think they'd be a really good starting point to look at to get some ideas from. So the redesign activity report is the final kind of stage of the redesign activity. So it's after you've done your implementation, heading towards the end of that week 5 to 9 block. You basically have the option of, or you have to report to both your peer triad, and eventually you have to submit that report to us as facilitators. which basically just gives a sense of your experience and a chance for you to reflect, saying this is how successful it was. These are some of the challenges that we undertook as part of it. Um, so that's a really important part. First of all, in providing a basis for your triad to understand what you have actually done as part of the redesign activity, and for giving us a touch point to see what you've done. And there's option there to either use the redesign activity written report template, which is essentially a set of questions that you have to ask with word counts, which directs you to, I suppose, directs you the way the report is structured, etc., or to answer those questions via a video, 5 to 10 minute video submission. And in terms of the video submission, that's just a case of potentially turning your selfie camera on and talking through your answers to the questions posed in that redesign activity report template. Um, if you do go with the video route, it's just a case really of uploading it to a file sharing platform like YouTube or something like that, and providing us with a link. Any private or public file sharing platform will do, and the link you can provide us through by using the actual redesign activity report template itself. There's a space in there if you go for the video option. In triad meeting number 4, you'll discuss this redesign with your peers. Triad meeting number 4 is actually a very, very important triad meeting in that it actually helps to play a role in the verification of the course participants. In other words, your triad will actually sit down together and we'll look at the badge criteria and say, have we each met the badge criteria? Then each of you will inform us about which members of the group you feel have met the badge criteria. So there's this element going on of peer-to-peer verification. Now we'll talk a lot more about that in the final webinar, which is in the last week of the course before you undertake peer triad meeting number 4. So I'm not going to get into that too much, but just to say that that there is an element here of the triad verifying your work, and the redesign report, if you like, provides evidence that you have met the badge criteria. So the redesign report template, just to go through the different things you're actually doing, you're actually answering as part of that. You're going to give 150 to 250 words on your key findings from your reflections. So in other words, the stage prior to the implementation, when you did the deep reflection activity, what did you actually discover when you sat down and reflected on that? You're going to describe the changes you made to your teaching and learning practices to embed UDL as part of the redesign activity. So in there, you'll make specific reference to principles and how you use those principles to guide the redesign of the lecture or the teaching activity that you've selected. You're going to do a little bit on the impact of the UDL implementation. That's impact on you as a teaching and learning professional, and also, if possible, to get some reflection from your students, to get some form of evaluation from them. So we recommend it can be something very simple, an online survey, even things like a show of hands on whether they enjoyed your approaches. We don't want this to be too heavy going for you. We want it to be as light touch as possible, but if possible, try to include some kind of student reflection in there on how the implementation went. And then finally, we'll ask you to look at the further changes you'd like to make to your practice after the badge. So this is kind of an aspirational piece about, again, some of the stuff that you might have identified through that deep reflection activity that you're going to do over the next week. So I've mentioned here about the peer triad. Yes, they're going to play a really key role. So basically, in advance of your final peer triad meeting, you will share your redesign activity report with them. That will give them a chance to see what you have done. And then in the final meeting, you'll discuss that. You'll then bring up the badge criteria itself and have a chat between yourselves about whether you reach a consensus on whether you've each met the badge criteria. So that's the role it plays in verification. But as I said, we're going to discuss that in quite a bit more detail in the final webinar, which is at the beginning of week 10 of the course. So before we move off the redesign activity, just want to highlight again that piece about the drop-in support service that Lisa Padden is going to be operating throughout weeks 5 to 9. So that's going to be every Thursday at 1 p.m. And it's going to be a 1-hour session. So she'll be there probably working away in the background and just letting people drop in and out as they need to ask your questions about the reflection, about the redesign, and indeed about the future facilitators activity piece, which we're going to move on to very shortly. If there's any questions there, I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A box, so please do feel free to drop some in. So you do that by going to the Q&A bar just clicking the Q&A bar and popping in a question, which should pop up for me. I'll try to keep half a minute in that as I move through. So again, look, as you know, we're available throughout the course, and I hope any of you who've been in touch so far will agree that we're quite quick to respond, and hopefully to resolve issues with you, any issues with you as you go. I know that one or two of you have had an issue with the Big Blue Button platform and have managed to find alternatives. So that's really good, and we've forwarded that feedback onto the forum so that the future iterations of the badge and they can look at that themselves. So thank you for that feedback, and please do keep in touch with it as you go through the course, because it's really valuable for us to know as we move through it. So I'm just going to move on now to the future facilitators activity. So basically, when we did the registration for this course, as you all know, that it was very much aimed at people who want to go on to facilitate the badge later down the road in their own institutions. The whole forum setup of the digital badge ecosystem that they've set up, really the idea is to create professional learning opportunities that have real scale to it. And as part of that scale, this train the trainer model is a key part of it. So what we're going to talk through now really is the kind of 5-hour add-on piece that goes. So the digital badge in UDL itself is 25 hours over 10 weeks, but there's a 5-hour add-on for future facilitators. And this add-on is a necessity for anybody who wishes to be a facilitator down the line. And it is really, really important to ensure that if you are planning to be a facilitator, that you do the 5-hour add-on piece, and you will then be issued a facilitator's badge for this. So I have a question in here just before we move completely off the redesign activity from John, who says, what date is the redesign activity due? Very important, John. Thank you very much for that. I'm actually going to jump back out here. So uh, first of all, there's a full brief about the redesign activity in the week 5 to 9 block. That's really important to state, and the same applies for the future facilitators activity. So within that brief here, you'll get full activity instructions. And as part of that, there's a submission deadline. The date for submission, so just to explain it, basically at the end of week 9, you will send your redesign activity report to your peer triad. That discussion then happens in week 10 with your peer triad, where you can discuss the outcome. And finally, you'll have to submit to us at the very bottom of the course homepage. You'll have to submit both your redesign activity report and your future facilitator activity report to us by the course end date, which is December 12th. So essentially the deadlines for both are actually the course end date, but you do have to complete in week 9 and submit and share it with your peer triad in advance of that. So we as facilitators won't be seeking to receive that before December 12th, but your peer triad will seek to receive them before that meeting, that key meeting in the final week of the course. So I hope that answers your question, John, but very important one. And there, just again, a little to clarify again as well, because this model of peer engagement that we're using relies on each other to verify the badge criteria that you've each met the badge criteria. That means that, we're not going to give you a grade or mark for that. All we're doing is, for us, it's about, we have an extra layer of evidence. Should there, for example, be any issues within the peer triad, maybe 2 of your peer triad drop off the map or something like that, that means that we have further evidence that you have met the badge criteria, as well as a whole host of evidence that we have from the data analytics that we're using in the back end here. So don't expect us to be giving you a grade or anything for those activities. It's really about the journey that you're taking here. It's not about marking the quality of your UDL or anything like that. Okay, so I'm just going to jump back into the PowerPoint. So in terms of our facilitators badge, yes, we're really hoping that all of you will look to roll out this badge in your own institutions next year, either yourselves or as part of a team. As I said previously, if you're seeking to do that, particularly if you're seeking to issue badges, then that means that at least one of your team has to have this facilitator's badge. In other words, has to have done this 5-hour add-on that we're going to do. So to receive the facilitator badge, you have to, number one, watch a short webinar. You're doing that right now. This is the webinar I'm referring to. You have to complete the template exercise, which is the future facilitators activity, which you'll find we highlighted it there in the week 5 to 9 block. So as part of that exercise, what you're doing is you're beginning to plan your facilitation. So that planning is, I suppose it's basically helping you to look at, for example, things like how UDL fits into your current institutional policies and practices. So there's a little bit of research that's involved. And part of that is about how you sell the badge internally, both upwards and to potential participants. So it's about helping you understand how UDL fits within the culture, the policy, the structure of your university. You'll do things like create a draft schedule. If you don't have an intention to do it, for example, in the next semester, that's okay. It's a draft schedule. This is something you can just create based on your I suppose an imagined schedule, if you like, if you don't actually planning a hard redesign in semester 2, but maybe looking to do it further down the line, for example. And you'll also consider the opportunities and challenges in delivering a course like this. So those opportunities and challenges could be a whole myriad of different things. It could be things like the resources available to you, the capacity of your institution, to the technical capacity of your institution, for example, could be a factor in that. So there's lots of different opportunities and challenges. You'll be guided in the facilitator activity to really take a look at those. And finally, then there's a discussion with your peer triad, and that's attached into the final peer triad meeting in number 4 for those of your peer triad who are also doing the facilitators activity. And that's really, again, just to present your ideas. This is what I'm thinking, and get some feedback from your colleagues. Well, maybe have you thought about that if you do it this way, that it might not suit this cohort of people, etc. Those kind of things that you'll tease out with your peer triad group. So that's really the key things you have to do as a potential facilitator to receive the badge from us. So as a facilitator, again, I mentioned this sort of the digital badge ecosystem that this lives in of the National Forum. Basically what there's 16 of those badges, and what they are is learning packs. So these learning packs give all of the tools and support necessary for a facilitator to roll the badge out themselves in their own institutions. These packs are under Creative Commons, which means they're entirely reusable by anybody. But to actually issue the badges, which are National Forum badges, then you will have to receive the facilitator's badge from us by doing this course now. So the pack itself, just to give you a sense of what it includes, I should say that the updated pack, first of all, will be available next week. If you go to the forum website and download the pack as it is now, it's actually the kind of old world pack, which doesn't include a lot of the new online content that we've done. For example, the 3 individual modules examining the principles of engagement, representation, action, and expression. They aren't included. It also doesn't include a lot of sort of updated and additional stuff about the peer engagement that we've learned from the first rollout of the badge. So I would urge you to wait until the next iteration of that, which should be available next week. So we'll notify all the participants through that. I just have a question here from Vikram. He says, is there a suggestion on how to make their own institutions get interested in the future facilitator? How do we sell it when we qualify? Or is it our responsibility then? But the ecosystem is not well served. Any comment will be appreciated. Yeah, so I mean, what I would encourage you to do, first of all, I will say it is your responsibility. Of course, there's always support here from ahead if there's any way we can help you in that. And what I will say is that there's lots of different routes. As part of the future facilitator activity, you're going to be identifying those institutional priorities that link to UDL, and that's key in getting your institution interested, because what you'll be saying to them really is UDL, like this course can help you to meet your strategic priorities in this area. We've said as an institution in our strategy that, for example, we want our future graduates to have X, Y, and Z graduate attributes, and that UDL can help us to support the building of those graduate attributes. That's just an example. So it is your responsibility, but I would say is to open your eyes, Vikram, to the potential for collaboration within your institution. So who are going to be your key co-conspirators, if you like. So you can look at people in, for example, disability access, for people directly in the teaching and learning office. These are all potential co-conspirators that you might be able to join and sort of strengthen, if you like, the coalition around the badge like this. So there's also as well the potential for mentoring, and if you do go on to roll out the badge, I'd urge you to get in touch to see if we can hook you up with a mentor who's already rolled the badge out previously, and they can share some insights on that and how they did it in their own institution, because this badge has been rolled out by several HEIs and by several several ETBs in the FET sector as well. So they can maybe help you to shed some light on that to see how they went about building, building an appetite for this course in their own institution. So I hope that answers your question somewhat, but what I would say is that it's your responsibility, but that we're here to support you as an organisation, and we'll do everything in our power to that we can to help support that aim. If anyone else, by the way, has any comments on that that might support Vikram in his question there, you can pop them into the Q&A box, and I'll actually see them there as well, and I'll read them out as we go through. Okay, so just back to the presentation. The instructional or the facilitators pack, which will be updated next week, as I said, and we will notify you as part of the course emails that it is ready for download. We'll also include it as a link in the future facilitators activity section of the course, which is in the week 5 to 9 block. So as part of that, what you get is it's basically an instructional manual on how to roll out the course. So if you think about, I think we mentioned previously the idea of this being kind of an IKEA flat pack, that we give you all of the course materials, so all the bits of wood, the screws you need, but we also give you an instructional manual which kind of guides that course administration, guides everything else that you need to do to roll out the course. So we give you, for example, all of the online modules, and we give you them in various formats, in SCORM format, which they are currently in the course here. We give you the original SCORM authoring files, which is articulate storyline files, which if you have access to the articulate storyline software, means you can export those files in various different formats. We also give you the word-based versions of the files, so the accessible versions of the files, which, by the way, you can also download from the course homepage that you're on right now at the very beginning, of the very top of the course homepage in the introduction section. In terms of the materials, the other materials that we give you materials to support the peer engagement piece. So there's 2 types of peer engagement which you can choose. I'll go through that a little later in the presentation. But we give you, for example, the instructions for peer triad meetings that you can share with the peer triad, so to guide them in their meetings, or a workshop plan if you go down the other routes, which is not the route that you're doing currently, but we'll explain that a little bit later on. We give you things like the redesign activity briefs that you'll need to circulate, and the templates for completion. We will give you template communication emails that you can then edit them to suit your own situation, and we'll give you a template schedule producer, which is based off this 10-week format that we're proposing, which maybe help you just to kind of get in your own head to schedule when the different tasks should take place and give you suggested dates for those as a starting point. I should say that all of this stuff is pretty flexible. We are aware that you're all operating in different settings. You have different institutional, for example, your schedules might be different institutional priorities, different things going on in your institution, maybe other events that could affect your rolling out of the badge. So we're fully aware of that, and everything really in the course is fairly flexible, other than the badge criteria and those online modules which provide the main, I suppose, knowledge content of the badge itself. So there's a few key choices that facilitators of the badge have to make that I'd just like to go through. The first is the mode of delivery. So as you know, we're doing this course fully online, which means all elements of the course are online. The kind of key elements of the digital badge for UDL being your online modules, your peer engagement, and your redesign activity. You're doing all of that piece online. So again, you can choose to do pretty much any element of the course, with the exception of the 5 online modules. You can do any element of the course either online or offline. So the only non-negotiable really is that the 5 online modules are included. Everything else you can decide based on your own institution whether to do online or offline. So the factors that might affect your decision, I suppose, could be things like the technical capacity of your team and your comfort working in the online setting. uh, your institution's infrastructure. Some of you may be coming from very small FET colleges, while others will be coming from big HEIs with a big infrastructure and support system around it. And the type of institution you work in terms of the geographic spread of your participants, whether your teachers slash lecturers are likely to be in the same place on a regular basis, which will make the peer interactions, easier to manage in that sort of, in a more face-to-face setting. So there's lots of different factors that will affect that decision. And that's something that you'll work out again as part of your future facilitators activity. The other really key choice that facilitators have to make is whether to use the triad method for peer engagement or the workshop method. So one of the key criteria of the badge is that you engage with your peers to deepen your understanding of UDL. All of you have been participating in this course, which is using the peer triad method. The peer triad method is where you meet 4 times throughout the course, and sometimes that engagement spills over into email interactions and other things. And the other method is whereby all of the peer activity is condensed into a 3-hour workshop. We provide these options because we realize that for some institutions it may suit better to do the workshop format and to do that all in one piece. So just to go through some of the differences, we have in the triad method really strong regular engagement, online or offline, whichever way you choose to set up. So in the past, we're doing it all of our peer engagement here online, of course, but in the past, other facilitators would have, for example, done things like have their peer triad meetings face to face, and that suits because they're all in the same campus, all working face to face, and they see each other very regularly. And the Yes, the other like they've also done other things. Like for example, some facilitators have held coffee mornings on the date of triad meetings, and they've fixed the triad meeting dates, which means that the triads are still getting into a room together. They're still meeting in small groups, but that all the triads are in a room together. So the triad approach really is great for creating that community of learning, and all of the research shows that when UDL is, the professional development around UDL is implemented in a community setting, that it's much more sustainable, and it creates that peer-to-peer support that goes on much longer than the professional development opportunity itself. If you go down the workshop method, then you're talking about a once-off event, you're talking about a face-to-face only event, and it means that you're not really creating that community, because it is just more of a one-off thing. They come and then they go again. The other differences between the two, I suppose, is that if you use the triad method, the facilitator organizes and manages the participants into triads. There is the kind of administrative piece around that, and sometimes that involves, for example, managing dropouts. Sometimes someone will drop out of the course, and you might have to rearrange the triads a bit. So there is a bit of course admin that take there. And in the triad method, the triads undertake the kind of key peer activities themselves, of course. Whereas in the workshop method, all of those peer activities are brought into a single workshop, and the facilitator has to organize and facilitate that workshop, and indeed the activities inside of it. So they have to do all the other elements that wouldn't be involved in that, like notify participants of time, arrange venues, all of that kind of thing. Another key difference would be that um, in the in terms of the feedback on the redesign activity, in the triad method, the triads are responsible for, in a sense, feeding back to each other, giving each other reflections and advice as part of that key peer triad meeting number 4. Whereas in the workshop method, the facilitator takes responsibility for the feedback on the redesign and the badge completion and verification. So there's a lot more admin at the final end of the course for facilitators using the workshop method, because they have to read whatever it is, 30 redesign activity reports, and they have to do a bit more homework on whether they've met the badge criteria. In other words, they have to make sure they keep good attendance sheets for the workshop, etc. Okay. Just to say, I have a question in from A. McKeown. I think was looking for perhaps a more discreet answering for your question. So I'll get back to you via email directly after this course, if that's okay. Um, so just moving on to the other key facilitators tasks. Um, One is, of course, fixing the course schedule. And again, there's complete flexibility around that. We recommend the 10-week model that we're using here because it's kind of compact and it all feels very nice and like, like a really nice course that it's very manageable. You can see the end of. But if it doesn't work for your institution, we realize that there's really different settings out there, really different things going on. So please feel free to use the flexibility in there. Equally, if you think about the other tasks involved, like the peer engagement, you might have another idea that we haven't thought of around that peer engagement, another setting where they could undertake the activities that we've proposed. So, you know, we're happy to grant you that flexibility as a future facilitator, and obviously recognize that you are the expert in your own campus and your own potential participants. So on participants, of course, you'll have to recruit all the participants for your course as a facilitator. And again, we recommend doing this in teams if you can. Don't try and do this on your own if you can avoid it, and partner up ideally with, it might be with other departments in your college, or it could be with the teaching and learning department or the disability access department. So, partner up and make the administration easier on yourself, because there is a bit involved, and it's good to, I suppose, divvy out some of the tasks. As an example here, Lisa looks after most of the peer triad work in this course, whereas I do the main course administration, emails, things like that. Um, yeah, so you'll have to do, of course, all of the course administration and communications. You'll notice that we send out standard emails a week to let people know what's happening and remind them to catch up. These are really important in keeping people on track. And as I said already, we provide template emails for that. And finally, you'll have to do the badge issuing. So basically on the badge issuing, what happens there is you register with the forum to be a facilitator. That gives you license to download the facilitators pack, and it gives you also a login for Open Badge Factory. And at that stage, you'll have to provide verification that you have the facilitator's badge, having done this course, to the forum. They'll give you that login then, and once you have that, that essentially gives you the power to issue badges. So you're essentially become the gatekeeper for those badges. So it's up to you to verify, to make sure that the people in your cohort have met the badge criteria. Yeah, that's a very, very smooth, simple process. So the issuing of badges, it's basically a case of when your course is done and you have a full list of those who completed the badges, you enter their email addresses into Open Badge Factory, and it's a very straightforward process of issuing the badges. That gets issued to their email, and that gives them a chance then to save the badges direct from the email link. Again, just to highlight that there is the drop-in support service. It's not just for the redesign activity, it's also for the future facilitators activity. So it's going to be running from next Thursday, which is Halloween, at 1 o'clock. And that'll run every week on a Thursday from 1 to 2 until the 28th of November. You just go into that week 5 to 9 block, click the drop-in activity and click join, which it's all done via the big blue button platform. So you can ask questions about your UDL reflection for your redesign and your plans for implementation. But by all means, feel free to contact Lisa directly as well, and I'll put her email up at the end of this presentation, which I think is now. Yes, so I'm just going to double check. Have we got any more questions? I'm not seeing any more questions in there. But listen, if you do have more private questions that you want to ask, or if there's anything that's not clear from what we've said so far, please don't hesitate to get in touch with either myself or Lisa, and we'll get straight back to you. But for now, I'm wishing you well on your redesign and your future facilitators activities. I hope you're all going to do the future facilitators activities. And yeah, I suppose we're nearing the end of the webinar. One final thing that I maybe forgot to mention as part of the facilitation piece is that the forum is also a support in this. So yes, the forum are providing the facilitators pack, which has all of the instructional materials, but there are other supports that the forum are open to providing too. For example, if you would like to run the course from the National Forums platform, as we are doing, that is an option for you. And that's actually quite a nice option in that it means that they can copy a version of the current course that you're on. So everything is there, and you can use that as a starting point for developing your own, going in, changing the dates appropriately, maybe adding some new elements depending on what you're going to do with the course. So that is a great option for you too, which you can explore, and you can get in touch with as you move more down the planning route for your own facilitation. At that, I'm going to say goodbye, and I kind of wish you all good luck with the redesign, because I know it's daunting, particularly for those of you who are quite new to UDL. But I would say is just, take a jump in, be creative, be flexible, and try to enjoy it. And again, don't try and change the world overnight. Start small and build up to something that is very useful for students, but very manageable within your period of the week 5 to 9. So without that, I'm going to just close off webinar 2 and say thank you very, very much for joining us. Another question from John: will you throw in the Swedish meatballs with the flat pack? John, if you roll out the badge for me, I will throw in anything you like. So Swedish meatballs are an option if you make that commitment. Yes, Swedish meatballs will be thrown in for you personally. Okay, guys, thanks very much. Bye bye.